James Brogan, The Long Road. James Brogan left the city in late spring with nothing but a duffel bag, a reliable old Ford that had already seen better decades, and a map folded so many times the creases looked permanent. He was done with schedules, done with cases that never quite ended, done with the weight of other people's emergencies. He wanted the road the way Kerouac had wanted it, open, indifferent, full of ordinary miracles. He wanted to drive until the engine hummed itself into a kind of prayer. He started east, then turned north. Niagara Falls hit him first with the sound. The roar came up through the soles of his boots before he even saw the water. He stood at the edge of the American side for a long time, watching the green-white curtain drop into the mist. Tourists took selfies. A young couple argued in low voices about money. Brogan bought coffee from a cart and leaned on the rail. An old man nearby kept glancing at a woman who was standing too close to the edge, phone out, laughing for a camera that wasn't there. When the woman's bag was snatched by a kid who vanished into the crowd, the old man started after him. Brogan was faster. He caught the kid by the collar behind a souvenir stand, recovered the bag, and handed it back without a word. The kid was 13 and scared. Brogan bought him a hot dog and told him to go home. The woman never noticed. The old man nodded once, like men who have seen worse things done with less effort. Brogan slept that night in a cheap motel that smelled of damp carpet and chlorine. In the morning, he pointed the Ford west. St. Louis rose out of the flatlands like a stainless steel promise. The gateway arch caught the late light and threw it back in a long silver curve. Brogan walked the riverfront, ate a pork steak sandwich, listened to a blues guitarist under the Eads Bridge. A woman in a waitress uniform was being followed by a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. Brogan stepped between them, quiet and large. The man looked at Brogan's hands and decided the night was over. Brogan walked the woman to her bus stop and watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he drove south of the city, found a quiet stretch of road, and slept with the windows cracked open to the river air. Chicago came next, all wind and steel and the smell of the lake. He went west side, the way the locals told him to, and sat in a corner booth at a place that still made deep dish the old way, thick crust, cheese layered under the sauce so it didn't burn. He ate slowly, listening to the talk around him. Cubs, weather, rent. Outside, a kid was being shaken down for his delivery tips. Brogan finished his pizza, paid, and stepped into the alley. The two older boys looked at him, then at the kid, then at the empty street. They left. Brogan gave the kid 20 and told him to keep the change next time. The kid nodded like he didn't believe it yet. The Midwest rolled under the tires. Iowa corn, Nebraska sky, Wyoming wind. Brogan drove without hurry. He stopped when the light was good, slept when the road got long. He listened to the radio when there was signal and to the engine when there wasn't. Somewhere in Utah the desert opened and the world got quiet enough to hear his own breathing. California's redwoods stopped him cold. He parked and walked into the grove at dawn. The trees rose like green cathedrals, trunks so wide he couldn't put his arms around them. Mist drifted between the trunks. A family of hikers had gotten turned around on a side trail. The father was trying not to look panicked. Brogan walked them out, pointed them back toward the main path, and kept going until the only sound was the soft drip of water from the canopy. He spent 2 days there, sleeping in the car, waking to the same impossible green. The petrified forest was the opposite, bone-colored and still. Logs turned to stone lay scattered across the painted desert like the bones of an ancient river. Brogan walked among them in the heat. A park ranger was arguing with a man who had tried to pocket a small piece of fossilized wood. Brogan didn't interfere. The ranger had it handled. That night Brogan camped on the edge of the park and watched the stars come out sharp and cold. Lowe's Angels arrived like a fever. He parked near Hollywood Boulevard and walked the Walk of Fame, reading the names under his feet. The Chinese theater's handprints were crowded with tourists. A street performer was being harassed by a man who thought the act was personal. Brogan stepped in, quiet again. The man left. The performer nodded thanks and went back to spinning fire. Brogan bought a coffee and watched the traffic crawl. He didn't stay long. The city felt like it was always about to tip over. Las Vegas glittered in the desert night. Brogan checked into a mid-range place off the strip and walked the floor of a casino that still had cigarette smoke in the air. He played a little blackjack, won enough to keep playing, lost enough to remember it was a game. A cocktail waitress was being pressured by a high roller who thought money bought more than drinks. Brogan finished his hand, stood up, and put himself in the way. The high roller looked at the size of him and decided the night was better spent elsewhere. Brogan tipped the waitress and left before the house noticed. Denver sat a mile high and smelled of pine and thin air. He caught a Rockies game at Coors Field, sat in the cheap seats, and watched the ball carry farther than it should. Between innings, he helped a lost kid find his parents. After the game, he walked the 16th Street Mall, ate a green chili burrito, and slept in a motel that still had paper maps in the lobby. The Grand Canyon opened under him like a wound in the earth. He stood on the south rim at sunrise and watched the light move down the walls, layer by layer. A tourist had wandered too close to the edge for a photo. Brogan pulled him back by the collar and didn't let go until the man was on solid ground. They shared water and silence. Brogan hiked a short way down the Bright Angel Trail, then turned around and drove on. He turned south and east, following the Gulf Coast. The air grew heavy and salt-sweet. He ate shrimp in Galveston, listened to Zydeco in a Louisiana roadhouse, slept on a beach in Mississippi with the windows down. Somewhere near Mobile, a fisherman's boat had been vandalized. Brogan helped him patch it and didn't ask for anything. The man gave him a cooler of ice and a six-pack anyway. The Keys were the end of the road. He drove the overseas highway with the water on both sides, turquoise and endless. In Key West, he rented a small boat and went out for a day of fishing. Nothing fancy, just lines in the water and the sun on his neck. He caught a few snapper, released most of them, kept one for dinner. That night he sat on a pier and watched the sunset turn the sky the color of bruised peaches. A local captain was having trouble with a charter that had stiffed him. Brogan listened, then walked the captain to the marina and waited while the money was returned. No raised voices, just presence. Somewhere along the way, in a dusty cafe outside Albuquerque, he ran into the major. The man looked older, the same quiet competence in his eyes. They shook hands like men who had once shared worse weather. The major was heading the other direction, some quiet consulting job. They traded stories over coffee, short versions, the kind that left out the blood and the names. The major asked if Brogan was looking for work. Brogan said no. The major nodded, paid the check, and they parted without promises. The months stacked up. Spring turned to summer, summer to the first cool nights of fall. Brogan's map was soft with use. The Ford's odometer had climbed into new territory. He had seen the falls and the arch, eaten the pizza and walked under the redwoods, stood on the Walk of Fame and lost a little money in Vegas, watched a ball sail into the thin Denver air, looked into the Grand Canyon's depths, and cast a line into the Keys' blue water. He had fixed the small wrongs that crossed his path and left the rest alone. One evening in early autumn he parked the Ford on a quiet overlook somewhere in the Smokies and watched the ridgelines fade into blue. The road was still out there, still calling. He had time. He had the car. He had the habit of looking after the people who needed looking after, then moving on. James Brogan started the engine, checked the mirrors, and rolled forward into the long American dusk.